My billionaire dad disowned me for marrying a poor man. At my wedding, he said, no inheritance, no trust fund. My husband smiled and said, we don't need it. 6 months later, my parents froze when they saw where my husband really worked. My father was mid-toast when he stopped being funny. He had the champagne flute. He had the room. 200 guests in the Porter Estate ballroom. The one my grandfather Walter built with the money he made before my father learned to spend it. He had the microphone and the practiced ease of a man who has been the most important person in every room he has ever entered. He had prepared for this moment. I could tell by the pause before he spoke. The performer's pause. The one that says listen, because what comes next matters. As of today, he said, Fontaine is no longer a porter in any way that matters. My new husband's hand found mine under the table. No inheritance, no trust fund, not one share of anything I have built. A sound moved through the room, not quite a gasp. The sound a room makes when something said out loud is worse than what everyone privately feared. My father smiled at his audience. He was enjoying this. That was the part that I could not look away from. Not the words, which I had anticipated in some form, but the enjoyment, the specific, practiced pleasure of a man who believes that power demonstrated in public is power doubled. She is a mechanic's wife, a small theatrical pause. She may enjoy the life she has chosen. My mother touched a dry eye with a folded handkerchief. My younger sister Blythe had her phone out, angled toward my father, capturing the moment for her followers with the focused expression of someone who has learned to monetize family drama. Preston Vance, the man my father had selected for me, the one with the Wharton MBA and the second-generation hedge fund, and the smile that never quite reached his actual eyes, leaned against a column near the bar and smirked with the specific satisfaction of someone who believes he has won a competition. He entered without being invited. I did not cry. I did not stand up. I held Owen's hand under the table and I waited. The way you wait when you know what's coming because you've been married to a patient man for 6 hours, and patience is apparently transferable. Owen let 4 seconds pass. Then he stood up, buttoned his jacket. The jacket was off the rack. A detail my father had noted when Owen walked into the rehearsal dinner and filed immediately as evidence of everything he'd already decided. Owen buttoned it slowly, the way he does everything, with complete attention, no performance. He faced my father across the room. He smiled. Not the smile of a man who is angry, the smile of a man who knows something the room doesn't, and has decided the room can wait a little longer. Thank you for the toast, Mr. Porter. His voice carried to the back of the ballroom without effort, the way the voices of people who are accustomed to being heard in loud places always carry. We don't need it. 4 words, plain as a torque spec. My father laughed. Too loud, the laugh of a man recalibrating in real time. You rent a hangar. Best money I spend, Owen said, and sat back down. I looked at my husband's profile, at the specific quality of stillness he has, the stillness of someone who has already done the calculation and is comfortable with the result, who doesn't need anyone in the room to understand it tonight. I squeezed his hand. He squeezed back, and I thought, he knows something. He's always known something. I just haven't asked the right questions yet. Let me tell you who I am before I tell you who my husband turned out to be. Because this story only makes sense if you understand that I was not a passive character in it. I was not the daughter who drifted along on her family's money and stumbled into an accidental reversal of fortune. My name is Fontaine Porter, Fontaine Calloway now, though the paperwork is still catching up. I'm 31 years old. I have a structural engineering degree from Georgia Tech and a professional engineering license in 4 states. And I earned both of those things the same way I have earned everything in my adult life, by doing the work twice and checking it once more, because that's what my grandfather Walter taught me before my father had a chance to teach me anything else. Walter Porter built the first Porter Hotel in 1974 with $40,000 in savings and a construction loan from a bank that told him to come back in 5 years, and was pleasantly surprised when he came back in 2. He was a man who understood materials. He could look at a concrete pour and tell you its compressive strength within 5%. He kept a set of brass calipers on his workbench that he'd had since his apprenticeship, and on Sunday mornings when I was small, he would take me to whatever project was underway and let me walk the structure with him while he explained what he was seeing. A building tells you things, he said, if you know how to listen. He left me the calipers when he died. He left my father the company, which, by the time Walter died, had become Porter Hospitality Group. 14 hotels, 3 resorts, a collection of restaurants, and a brand that meant something in the upper end of the market. My father had not built any of it. He had inherited it, expanded it aggressively using other people's money, and rebranded himself over 30 years as the kind of visionary entrepreneur who appears on magazine covers and keynotes industry conferences, and uses the word legacy in every 3rd sentence. I had worked in the company for 4 years after Georgia Tech. Structural consulting, mostly. The Porter properties were always building something, and having a licensed PE in the family who understood the business was genuinely useful, or should have been. What I discovered instead was that my father did not want a licensed PE. He wanted a daughter who looked good at the groundbreaking ceremonies, who could be presented to investors and their sons with equal ease, and who would eventually be absorbed into the organizational chart in a way that made the Porter hospitality story feel like a dynasty. Preston Vance was the instrument of the dynasty plan. He'd been selected the way my father selected everything, with more attention to the surface than the foundation. He was polished, he had the right name. He sat across from me at the dinners my father arranged with the practiced attentiveness of a man who has been told this is the ask, and I watched him not once ask me a real question in 3 months of those dinners. Owen Calloway was a real question. I met him on a Tuesday in October at a small airfield outside Savannah where I had gone to look at a structural issue with a maintenance hangar. He was under a Beechcraft King Air in Tidewater aviation coveralls, doing something to the left engine that I didn't recognize. He noticed the set of drawings I was was carrying and said, without looking up from the engine, "That's a tie rod connection detail, the one on the east wall. I noticed it last week." I stopped. I said, "How did you know that's what I'm here for?" He rolled out from under the plane and looked at me with the calm, unhurried directness of a man who is accustomed to precision and expects it from other people. "Because I read the drawings when they went up." A pause. "The east wall connection detail has a problem." He was right. The detail had a problem. I had spotted the same thing from the drawings that morning and driven 40 minutes to verify it in person. We stood at the hangar wall for 90 minutes talking about load paths and connection geometry and the specific failure mode I was concerned about. And somewhere in those 90 minutes, I understood that I was talking to a person who thought the way I thought, methodically, precisely, with a complete indifference to what the conclusion was supposed to be, and a total commitment to what it actually was. We had dinner that night. He asked real questions. He listened to the answers. He talked about aviation the way my grandfather Walter talked about buildings, with the reverence of someone who understands that the thing you are working on is always more important than your relationship to it. I told my father about Owen 4 months later. My father asked what Owen did. I said he was an aviation mechanic. He worked at a small company called Tidewater Aviation, out near the Savannah airport. My father's expression did the thing it does when the information he is receiving does not match the category he has prepared for it. A brief, controlled recalibration. Then the smile that means the subject is being filed as settled. "A mechanic," he said. The word landed with the specific weight of a verdict. That was the beginning of the end of something that had already been ending for years. We were engaged 8 months after the Beechcraft King Air and the tie rod connection detail. Owen proposed on the porch of the house he rented near the airfield. A small house, well kept, with good light in the mornings, and a workshop in the back where he kept tools I didn't fully recognize, and handled them with the care of someone who has learned that the right instrument used correctly is always faster than the wrong one used harder. I said yes before he finished the sentence. He laughed. I did too. I told my father the same week. He called Owen a phase. 3 months later, when it became clear that the phase was continuing, he called Owen a problem. By the time the invitations went out, he had settled on the word my mother used at the rehearsal dinner when she thought I couldn't hear. Unfortunate. I noticed things in those months. Small things. Things I cataloged without meaning to. The way an engineer catalogs details she doesn't yet know are relevant. The late phone calls Owen took on the porch. I'd come to the door and he'd be standing with his back to me, voice low, and the words I caught were the words of someone managing complexity. "Push the maintenance window. I'll handle the board." I told myself it was a union thing, a scheduling thing. Mechanics have boards, right? Some kind of oversight committee, maybe. The trade magazine on our kitchen table. I read half an article about a reclusive aviation billionaire, the man who still turns his own wrenches, before Owen came in and the conversation moved elsewhere. I did not read to the end. I filed it as interesting and moved on. The way pilots behaved when Owen walked the flight line. I went with him twice, to different airfields, and both times I watched something happen that I didn't fully process in the moment. Commercial pilots, men and women with 4 stripes on their shoulders and 20 years of hours in their logs, straightened when Owen came through. Not the straightening of employees seeing a colleague, the straightening of people who are in the presence of someone they report to. I told myself the airfield world was hierarchical in ways I didn't understand. That mechanics with certain specializations commanded a kind of respect. I almost believed it. The night the foundation cracked was a Thursday in March, 6 months after the wedding. I was at my desk in the home office going through the site documentation for a project my firm, Callaway Structural Consulting, 18 months old, 4 licensed engineers, my name on the door, had just been brought in on. A client referral from a colleague named Dr. Marcus Webb, PE, 20 years in structural engineering, whose opinion I trust more than almost anyone else's in the profession. The project was a review engagement for a new resort development, high-end, coastal. The signature feature was a cantilevered overwater pavilion, a glass and steel platform projecting 40 feet above the Atlantic, designed to hold 50 people for private events. The structural drawings were detailed and ambitious, and I had 2 concerns about connection details on the cantilevered section that I needed to walk in person before I could sign anything. The resort was called the Meridian Collection. I noted the name. It snagged on something I couldn't immediately identify. I set it aside. Quick pause. If you want more stories like this in better quality, my Spotify's linked in the description. I sent Marcus Webb an email confirming I'd take the engagement and telling him I'd need site access within 2 weeks. Then, because I was already at the computer and the thing that had snagged in my brain was still snagged, I searched the project name. Meridian Collection. Porter Hospitality Group's billion-dollar flagship. Signature feature, private jet to your suite. No terminal. No waiting. I kept reading. The concept lives or dies on a single aviation partnership, a company so exclusive its chairman has never appeared in public. Porter Hospitality has been in negotiations for 18 months. Sources close to the deal say the talks have stalled. The aviation partner's name was Meridian Aviation Group. I searched that. Meridian Aviation Group. Private. 47 aircraft. Operations in 9 countries. Fleet services contracts with 4 major carriers. Founder and chairman, reclusive. Has never appeared publicly. The billionaire who still turns his own wrenches. I looked at that phrase. The billionaire who still turns his own wrenches. I read the article through to the profile section. The profile mentioned a subsidiary, a smaller operation under the Meridian umbrella that handled regional maintenance contracts. Entry point for smaller operators. Good reputation for technical standards. The subsidiary's name was Tidewater Aviation. The coveralls in the corner of our bedroom closet that said Tidewater on the chest. The calls on the porch. I'll handle the board. The pilots. Straightening. The magazine on the kitchen table that I hadn't read to the end. I closed the laptop, opened it, searched Owen's full name. Callaway, Owen Callaway, Meridian Aviation Aviation Group. The results were sparse, deliberately sparse. I would later understand the digital footprint of a man who had chosen to operate at a specific remove from public attention. But there was one industry newsletter, the kind that gets emailed to aviation finance professionals and never appears in general search results, and it had a brief item from 2 years ago, a transfer of equity, a board appointment, and a name: Owen Calloway, founder and chairman, Meridian Aviation Group. I sat at the desk for a long time. Outside, the porch light was on. Owen was inside. I could hear the faint sound of a wrench turning, the workshop sounds that I had learned to sleep through in the same way you learn to sleep through traffic, because they are the sounds of a person being fully themselves. I thought about the wedding toast. You rent a hangar. Owen's smile. Best money I spend. He had been renting it from himself. I thought about my father, who had spent 18 months trying to get a meeting with the invisible man at Meridian Aviation, who had built his entire flagship concept, the billion-dollar centerpiece of the next phase of hoarder hospitality, on a partnership that had not materialized, who had called Owen a grease stain at my wedding. I did not wake Owen. I sat at the desk until the windows turned gray. Then I got up and I went to walk the site on the Atlantic coast, because the cantilevered pavilion had 2 connection details I wouldn't sign without correcting, and the building didn't care about my family drama. It never does. I want to tell you about the engineering review because it matters more than the revelation, which I know is not how these stories are supposed to go. The Meridian Collection Resort was on the Georgia coast, about 60 miles south of Savannah, a stretch of coastline that my grandfather Walter had looked at twice in his life and decided was too exposed to hurricane season loads for the kind of construction my father wanted to put on it. My father had hired a different structural engineer. The drawings were technically compliant. They were also in 2 specific locations on the cantilevered pavilion, not the kind of work I would have done or would sign. The cantilevered section extended 40 feet over open water on an exposed coast. In a Category 2 event, the wave action and wind load at that elevation would produce forces that the 2 flagged connections, bolted steel to steel, moment connections at the cantilever root, were detailed to handle at 70% of what I calculated as the demand. 70%. The building does not care about 70%. I called Dr. Marcus Webb on a Thursday morning and told him what I'd found. Marcus is 63 years old, licensed in 8 states, the kind of engineer who has seen enough structural failures to be permanently unimpressed by anyone's reputation. Sign your name if you can sign it straight, he said. Don't touch it if you can't. I need redesign on 2 connections, I said. If they'll give me 2 weeks, they'll give you what they need to give you to get the certificate of occupancy. Send me the calcs when you have them. I sent them the findings. The project team pushed back. They always push back. That's part of the process. Not a moral failing, just the reality of construction schedules and opening dates, and the specific pressure that a billion-dollar grand opening creates. The structural engineer of record called me on a Friday and spent 40 minutes explaining why my analysis was conservative. I spent 40 minutes explaining why conservative was the right call when 50 people were standing 40 feet above the Atlantic. He revised the connections. I walked the steel again, verified the revised work, reviewed the revised calcs twice, the way my grandfather Walter taught me. Then I signed the stamp, my license number, my professional reputation, which is the only kind of reputation that is actually mine. I did not tell Owen what I was working on. He did not tell me about the Meridian partnership negotiations. We had arrived separately at the same point on the map, and we were both waiting. The night of the grand opening was a Friday in April. 500 guests, a sitting governor and his chief of staff, 6 institutional investors with portfolios that made my father's feel like a starter fund. The kind of room my father had been building toward his entire career. Not just the money, but the validation that comes with this specific species of money. The old kind. The kind with foundations named after it. Owen dressed that evening with the same methodical calm he brings to everything. White dress shirt, dark suit, no tie. A choice that I had long since understood was not casual, but precise. The specific presentation of a man who knows which room he's walking into and has decided he doesn't need to perform for it. I wore a slate gray dress and my grandfather's brass calipers in my bag. That last part is probably something I should explain. I had carried the calipers to every significant professional moment in my career. Every license exam, every project that mattered, every meeting where I needed to remember what the work was actually for. It was not superstition. It was the same reason a surgeon might carry something of their mentors, or a musician might have a particular ritual before a performance. The calipers were the object that connected me to the version of this work that Walter had done before me. They reminded me why precision matters. They kept me from performing when the situation required me to just be accurate. I put them in my bag next to my stamped engineering documents. We drove to the coast. The ballroom of the Meridian Collection Resort was everything my father had promised in every brochure. Glass on 3 sides, warm light, the Atlantic visible and dark beyond the terrace. The overwater pavilion was lit from below, a pool of warm amber beneath the glass floor, 40 feet above the surf, which was lower than usual on a calm April night, and was still, at that height, unmistakably powerful. I looked at the pavilion and thought about the connection details, about the revised calcs, about the stamp I'd put on the certificate at 3:14 p.m. that afternoon. It'll hold, I thought. I checked it twice. My father was near the front, lit, in his element, moving through the room the way he'd moved through rooms my entire life, with the specific gravitational pull of a man who believes attention is a form of tribute. He had not seen Owen yet. Owen found my hand in the crowd. His palm was warm. His pulse, when I pressed my thumb to his wrist by habit, was entirely normal. This is the thing about Owen. He is physiologically calm in the way that people are calm when they have made peace with what's coming and are just waiting for it to arrive. I said very quietly, "How long have you known about the resort project?" He looked at me. "Since Since the preliminary design phase, 18 months. And my firm? Marcus Webb recommended you 6 weeks ago. I didn't know until the contract came across my desk. He paused. I almost pulled it. Why didn't you? Because you do good work. And because the building didn't deserve to be caught in our family drama. I looked at him for a moment. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. He smiled. It's a low bar. The lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies stepped to the microphone, a man named Carter Bliss, who had handled high-end event production for 20 years and whose voice had the specific stage-trained resonance of someone who knows how to fill a room. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, tonight marks not only the opening of the most significant hospitality development in the last decade. Tonight, for the first time in the company's history, the chairman of Meridian Aviation Group will appear in person. A murmur went through the room. I looked at my father. He was near the front, champagne in hand, face arranged in the expression of a man who is finally about to get what he has been waiting for. I had seen that expression on him before. He wore it the way he wore his suits, with complete confidence in the impression it was making. Owen let go of my hand. He gave me one small, private look, the look of a man who has been standing to the side of the frame for a long time and has decided the moment has come to step into it. Then he walked toward the stage. I watched my father's face. It emptied, top to bottom, like water draining from a glass. The color first, then the animation, then the specific quality of presence that my father carries in every room he enters, the gravitational pull, the performance, all of it, gone, in the time it took Owen Calloway to walk 20 feet and step onto a stage. His champagne flute tipped in his fingers. He didn't notice it spill down his cuff. Carter Bliss at the microphone, the founder and chairman of Meridian Aviation Group, Owen Calloway. 500 people rose to their feet. Standing ovation, the kind that is not courtesy, but recognition. The room understanding in real time the scale of what they were looking at. 18 aircraft service contracts, 47 planes. The company that had made the Meridian Collection concept viable. The man who had kept his face out of every magazine and every conference and every industry event for 11 years, and was standing in the light now in an off-the-rack suit, perfectly still, waiting for the room to finish. My father stood alone, motionless, the one fixed point in a room that was moving around him. The standing ovation lasted longer than it needed to, and not 1 second longer than it deserved. He found Owen during the cocktail hour after the presentation. I watched him cross the room, watched the specific way he recalibrated his body language in transit, the controlled relaxation of a man shifting from shock to strategy, hand extended, voice warm, pitched for the nearby people who were watching. Owen, surely now that we're family, we can finally finalize the partnership. Owen looked at the outstretched hand, then at my father's face. I received your proposal, he said. His voice was not loud. It was calibrated, the exact volume required to be heard by the people immediately around them, no farther. I declined it. Meridian doesn't partner with people who treat their family like inventory. My father's hand dropped. He turned, found me. The old fury, rising, the specific controlled rage that has always been most frightening because it maintains its shape. Because my father does not shout, he reduces, and I have felt the weight of that reduction my entire professional life. You planned this, he said. Quiet, private, the words for me alone. You humiliated your own father in front of 500 people. I opened my bag. I took out the brass calipers, worn smooth from 40 years of Walter's hands, cool in my palm. The weight of them exactly right, as it always is. My father looked at them. I looked at him. The overwater pavilion you'll photograph tonight, I said. My voice was even, unhurried, the voice I use when I am reading findings into a record. The cantilevered glass room, the signature feature of your flagship resort. It does not legally open without an engineer of records stamp. I let him look at the calipers. I found 2 connection details that needed revision. I required the revisions. I verified the work. I signed the certificate of occupancy at 3:14 this afternoon. I held his eyes. You're welcome. I do good work. My father said nothing. There is a thing that happens when a man who has built his entire identity on the premise that he alone controls the significant things in a room is forced to encounter evidence that he does not and never did. I had seen versions of it before, in boardrooms, in client meetings, in the particular moment when a structural problem reveals itself, and the people who had opinions about the structure have to reconcile their opinions with what is actually there. My father was not a building, but he was, in that moment, subject to the same principle. The truth doesn't care about your feelings about it. It just loads. He turned and walked away, not dramatically, not with the exit of a man who has chosen to leave, the walk of a man whose legs have made the decision without consulting him. I put the calipers back in my bag. Owen appeared at my shoulder. He had seen the last 30 seconds of it. He didn't ask what was said. Ready? He asked. Yes. We walked out through the glass doors to the terrace. The Atlantic was below us, dark and loud in the way that coastline is always loud at night, the kind of sound that is bigger than everything you brought to it. I looked at the overwater pavilion, lit amber above the surf. The connections were sound. The steel was doing what I had asked it to do. The building was holding 50 people 40 feet above the water, the way a building should, without drama, without announcement, just the quiet, total reliability of work done correctly. It tells you things, Walter said, if you know how to listen. I listened. 14 months later, Callaway Structural Consulting has 12 licensed engineers now, a second office in Atlanta, and a reputation in the coastal resort sector that I did not plan and did not pursue, and that arrived anyway, because that is what a reputation is when it is built on the work rather than the name. Owen has appeared in public 3 more times since the grand opening. He finds it mildly uncomfortable each time, which I find deeply comforting. He still goes to the workshop on Sunday mornings. He still turns his own wrenches. He will probably do this when he is 80. The Porter Hospitality flagship is open. It is very beautiful. I am told the overwater pavilion has been photographed approximately 11,000 times since opening, which I know because my sister Blythe posted the number on her followers page with the caption, "Can you believe my family built this?" I noted the pronoun choice and moved on. My father called once in September. I answered. He spoke for a while. He did not apologize, not in the way that apologies are supposed to work, not with the weight of the thing he actually did. He said water under the bridge and I hope we can move forward, and Walter would have wanted the family whole. He invoked Walter twice, which I found instructive. I said, I hope so too. I meant it actually, not as generosity, as arithmetic. Hope costs nothing and forecloses nothing and is simply the accurate description of my condition, which is that I do not wish him harm and I do not require his approval, and I will continue to do good work regardless of either of those facts. He is not called again. I am not waiting for the call. The calipers are on my desk. They are always on my desk. Walter's hands wore them smooth. Mine are getting there. I always did good work. I always will.